사시 부기 주신 내톡참 위라빈시인데 임파디 상계 신두 밑에 우월기 여군 남락 신가 주파쇼 상대 주랑 석기 적남라 장주 vardu dakni 격수지 다리 진행 기배 성남기 Rola Venture Sangye Druparsho Sangye Chinam Sukti Choknamla Chanchu Vardu Dakni Kyasushi Dagi Chinyen Vite Sunamki Rola Venture Sangye Druparsho Sangye Judam Soki Choknamla Jamshu Bardu Dakni Kyapsuchi Daki Chinyen Gipe Sonamki Rola Venture Sangye Druparsho.
Just get comfortable. We're going to do a 12-minute meditation tonight.
I'm going to speak less on this one. We'll do the same meditation we did last week, but I will speak less, and I'm going to shift it slightly from, which you'll probably notice, from visualizing the world that you wish to live or wish to have, or the happiness you wish to seek, to feeling what that would be like, okay? So there's going to be a subtle difference, and I'm just curious to see if that changes anything for anybody. Start by relaxing. Just slowly, naturally inhale and exhale through your nose. Letting your awareness descend from the head down to the ground. Settling the body completely, allowing your body to breathe. Let's begin to settle the mind. Begin to release all your concerns, your anxieties and stresses, fears. Using your breath, slowly let it go. Just be present here and relaxing and releasing. And let's start with the first section. What would it feel like to be truly happy? What would your happiness, the things you wanted or want most, what would that feel like? And as the ideas come to mind, begin to use your breath so that in every out-breath, arouse the aspiration of the feeling you wish to have. And then begin to move into imagining what this could look like. Or how you would embody this world that you wish to have. And then we move to the next section, understanding and realizing that our lives are too intertwined we can't do this alone. So in order to realize the happiness that you seek, the world that you wish to have, what would you love to receive from the world around you? What would that feel like? That support that you need to enable you to realize your heart's desire. You can use every inhale, arousing and filling yourself with this aspiration. Drawing on the power of your imagination, begin imagining you receiving all that you truly need to find the happiness you truly seek. Imagine what it looks like and what that would feel like.
Here we go. I'm going to try to see if I can get us out of class on time tonight. I think we can. I don't know about next week, but this week I think we can. Okay, so we've gone from the movement of the mind and talked about bodily and verbal karmas. And then last week we talked about 3 types of karmas, right? Virtuous, non-virtuous, neutral. Tonight, we're going to be talking about what happens when you do them. So what are the consequences of the karma? And it's going to be for those of you that are doing the reading, the Abhidharma system has a lot of different presentations of karma. They cut it and dice it and have it is quite complex. We're going to be focusing on really the most three basic. It's kind of the top three that Geshe Michael felt like were the most important to understand the fundamentals of the Abhidharma system and how they look at karma. Okay. So we're going to start with the three divisions of karma. This is, again, we're talking about Master Vasubandhu. Last week, I'm just going to correct myself so I don't forget. Last week, Henry had asked what book we were in, and we're still in the fourth book, just so you know. So this is Master Vasubandhu's going to move forward in defining the three different ways of karma. And he talks about it as like the first wave. Can we say Tongir Gile? Again, Tongir Girle. My hips are too tight or open. The first one, Tongir, means which you are going to see. This tong is also another way of seeing it. Some of you have seen it in reference to receiving. Gi is which will. And lay is in reference to karma. Okay. And what the statement is saying is really karma which you will see. And what that means is karma which you will see in this lifetime. It's the karma that results in this lifetime. So this is the first division of karma that he talks about. And the karma that you see in this lifetime ultimately is really the basis of the secret teachings or the tantric teachings that you'll sometimes hear dropped here and there. There are certain powerful karmas that you can actually create in this lifetime that will supercharge. Those are my words. That's not like a scriptural word, so you know. Don't go out being like, I'm supercharging my karma. But that's how I think of it. It's karmas that are charged in a specific way based on a practice that you have that can actually ripen in this lifetime. Okay. The second one, can you say Kene Nogir Gile? Again, Kene Nogir Gile. So Kene is afterborn. Nongir is experience. Gi, which will, yeah, and lay, yeah. So what do you think this one is? Yeah. Well, yeah.
Next life.
Ah, nice. Yeah. Karma that's in your next life. So technically it's actually like second next life because your bardo is a birth. It's part of your lifetime, but it is still a birth, but it is your actual next rebirth, like your next after the bardo stage.
On the first one is without supercharging, you can still have karma ripen in this life, or does it require supercharging?
In this system, what they're saying is that it would have to, well, that's not true. We're going to talk about that later. We'll talk about like what karmas are more amplified than others. Yeah.
You can be the karma that ripened from previous lives.
Most of us are experiencing karmas now from previous lives. Yeah. Okay. Good? We're good here so far? We have a lot of lists tonight, so I'm going to try to go through some that maybe don't require as much time. Okay, the third one, the last one, is Lendrang Shenla. Nyongir Gile. Say it one more time. Lendrang Shenla. Nyongir Gile.
So Lendrang is times. And it's really in reference to like multiple times, like 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. Shenla is other in. Nyongir experience will be. B, which red, and red. So what do you think this one is? Yeah. After your next lifetime, anything after that, any ongoing, that's what this would be. So it is karma, which will be experienced in other times. Yes, please.
Many questions. Red means like to, from.
Yeah, I
It's
know.
like a joiner word.
Yeah, I
right?
know. You
Okay.
know, it's true. I was actually wondering that too. I don't know why.
It just refers back to like it's a
Yeah.
three versions of common. We're not going to keep
Yeah,
carving. the
that's what I
word
think
on
it
that.
is. Because I was actually looking at that and I'm thinking about it. I'm like, oh, I got a question about later. But that's what I think it is.
Yeah.
Like reference to that, like it being karma. I'm just gonna also, I just wrote some notes, like an appendix, like an FYI. There are times where in scriptures you will see the word when karma is used. It's actually not represented necessarily in positive karma, but there are times in scriptures and other even commentaries that we may see where karma is only referred to as like a dirty karma, as what they'll say, or like a negative karma. And the implications here is that that karmas that ripen ultimately, even if they're good or bad, will end. And so there's kind of like this negative connotation to it. That's how it's used. It's not always the case, but it's just good for you to know so that when you see other types of commentaries out there or different systems, they're not going to always refer to karma as a positive thing. Okay? In particular, when there are karmas talked about, when they speak about the Buddha or enlightened beings, they actually won't speak about karma in relation to enlightened beings. It won't be like his or her. Actually, it won't even be, but that's a different thing. That's not tonight. They won't use reference of enlightened beings' relation to karma. They'll talk about it more of an experience of a pure field, but not so much in those relationships. So that's something just to note. It's not something you need to know for your homework, but it's just something you know. Okay, so we're going to go into 4 kinds of karmas which must ripen. The reason why the first part is important
to consider and why it would matter to you is so that you can start to understand how you're going to have the most karmic impact. Right? I know that sounds really funny. I was thinking about this language and I was like, it's kind of like karmic impact. Like, where do you have the most impact? What does that look like? How do you do that? And in the Abhidharma system, they're a little squishy about karma in terms of ripenings, but they actually don't believe in their system that all karmas ripen. And but they are very clear about, they kind of discern it in terms of like certain karmas and not certain karmas. What they do is they're very clear about 4 karmas that will absolutely ripen. And so we're going to talk about those because those are definites. That being said, it doesn't mean that karmas that are created don't ripen disappear. They're not saying that it will disappear. They just don't think it necessarily ripens. And that will go later. There's another class that we're going to have that talks about like different ways karmas need to be, like the different conditions in order for karmas to ripen, and there's laws of karma and that such. Yes?
Just connecting what you just said with, if I understood your earlier point, even these definite karmas are ripening in a samsaric way in that they must end. Like we're not planting, it's impossible for a conditioned samsaric mind to plant like an everlasting pure karma. Ever. Yes, kind of. So the karma just always. Yeah, it ends at some point. Okay. When you think about karma, it ripens, or yes. I'm going to leave it at that. So that's just something we should know. That's just something that you just know. Like different systems have different ways of talking about it, and there are times where in different traditions, you'll just see that karma and Buddha, the Buddha or the enlightened beings won't always be synonymous. Like you won't see them paired together, and they use karma more in the sense of dirty karmas. They'll talk about it in that sense. That's just how they refer.
But even
even something that ripens fully would have to create its own ripples, right?
Yeah.
So karma never fully ends or ripens.
Oh, I see.
Like remember the meteor, right?
Sure,
So,
sure.
like, once the meteor hits me, now my kids don't have a
Oh,
father or something, right? So that creates all sorts of.
I guess we'll talk about cause and effect. We'll talk about cause and effect. There's a correlation of cause and effect that you're bringing into the mix that we'll get to.
Okay.
The ripple effect isn't. Sorry, I should back up. There isn't that kind of ripple effect that you are talking about in terms of one. For instance, that's not a good example. That's like a very violent example. Okay, if I shoot you, that's fine. Okay, no, like, why is that the idea? If I scream at you, right? It's not necessary that you're going to scream back at me, right? Or does that make sense, right? So like we have these ideas of cause and effect. Like if you think that I'm going to scream at you, or if I'm going to push you, or if I'm going to be violent to you, that maybe you will, or even if even if I shoot you, it doesn't mean that just because I shoot you, you're going to die. It doesn't, those aren't necessarily the karmic correlations, and we'll talk about that later.
Right, but it was my karma to be shot.
Yes, but it's not necessarily your karma to die.
Right. But
Or it's not even your karma to even have it affect you in any way. I mean, those are two different karmic things that are happening. We'll get to that. I promise. Okay. It's like we'll get to that. Okay, so we're going to talk about Sorry, we have technical difficulties.
Yeah, sorry.
No worries. Yes.
So is it because karma ends, samsara ends as well at some point?
No. If karma ends, samsara ends? No. Because even technically, the Buddha does have karma. They just don't talk about karma all the time in reference to the Buddha. Just bookmark it, and then we're going to move on.
So Buddhists still have a mind that moves, right?
Yes, yeah. And Buddhists do create karmas. Every being has a karma, can plant karmas. How it ripens is a whole different thing. I know, everyone's like, okay. 4 kinds of karma which must ripen. The first one, can we say shuk drakpo? Again, shuk drakpo. So this shuk means force, and drakpo is fierce. It's deeds that are committed with strong emotion or fierce. What it means is that karmas that are charged with a certain emotion, the scripture talks about it in terms of fierce or force. There's it's amplified by an emotion, like a fierceness to it. I wouldn't even say it's like, there's a force to it. Anything like that actually will ripen when it's a karma that will absolutely ripen according to the Abhidharma system. Okay, and that doesn't necessarily mean for bad things too. It could be good things. It's like if you are going after somebody and you are meditating on it and you're planning it and you're thinking about it and you just really go after them with a charge. There's like a charge to it. That's a better word, like a charge to that emotion or that action. There's that has a different implication than saying something accidentally or flippantly or whatnot, right? It's the same thing with good too, like giving with a charge, like really feeling the give and what that means has a different karmic implication than just, oh, it's your birthday? Yeah, I got you a card. Like, there you go. Got it. Like, just, it's another task I'm done with. Does that make sense? So it's like even all the things that you do at work where, or your family or anything, where you have any type of charge. It also applies to ignorance. Like when you are just absolutely charged that you're like, I am right, I don't give a damn what you say. Like that's a charge. So just watch out, because it's also things like that. Like pure ignorance. I mean, New Yorkers are the worst. I really think we are. Like you see people fighting on the street, like especially when there's, like, have you guys seen like when people get into accidents? It's crazy. Like the fights that happen, you know, and the injustice we feel and the ignorant. I mean, it's just insane. To me, I also, like for me, when I think about this specific one, I also just think about like, not just anger, and love, but also judgments that we have. Like we have charges against that, you know, where we make judgments and criticisms about people, and there's that element to it. I know, it's so intense. You know, after last class, I will just note, when we talked about the non-virtues, right? And the next day my mother calls me, so charged up. She's so upset about our family has this group chat, and we're trying to all get together, and the whole family is just not participating. She's calling, and she's like, I don't know what the deal is with your cousins. I think it's this. And she was just after them. And it was like first thing in the morning, and it just made me think about schisms and how we create schisms, you know? And I'm like, I'm not taking sides. I just taught this last night. Like, I'm trying to neutralize this. And she's like, I don't know why you're taking their side, you know? And then she just hangs up on me. And I'm like, but it was just interesting to see when you think about these concepts, they're not ones that are new to you. Most of you have heard some iteration or some form of these ideas and concepts. But it is, I think, very helpful to hear it again in different systems, and especially in this system, and how you apply it to your life and what that means, and where do you have a force or a charge behind the certain things that you do, you know, and not just for things that are ignorant or things that will create pain and suffering in your life, but also how do you use it to amplify the goodness in your life and the pleasure, right? Like where can you consider really thinking about giving and helping somebody, and not feeling like it's an obligation or it's just, you know, I guess so. But having that feeling of, yeah, I'm going to do this, and if I'm going to be there for that birthday party, I'm going to get the best birthday gift possible, you know, and I'm there, I'm going to participate. Like, how do we do that is also another way to think about it. Yes.
Yes, I can ask.
Yeah, please. I'm sorry. Yes.
Is that why, I mean, is this why in so many of the practices, like, for example, they place such a strong emphasis on developing this wish of bodhicitta, because it's like, if you're creating a strong emotional charge, then you're guaranteed. Yeah.
I mean, that's why there's so much about the intention. Like that's why they talk about it in that way, right? We always hear what's the intention, and not just the conceptual intention or the strategic intention of why you're doing certain things you're doing, but the emotive quality that comes along with it, and how. That's why even tonight I was thinking about this meditation, and I thought, you know, we're thinking through things so much, which is not important. It is important, but how do you start to also shift to feeling about it, right? And how do you have a way of, because we're, you know, it's not like when we feel suffering, we're like, I feel suffering today because, you know, like I got paid X amount of dollars when I should have gotten. I mean, it's not like that. Or I feel suffering today because my schedule was out of sync and I couldn't have time to. You have a feeling that arises that creates suffering. I feel anxiety. I feel stressed out. I feel like I'm not being respected. I feel like I'm not getting what I need. I feel like I'm not feeling loved. I mean, it's a feeling thing, and we have it all the time. And so how do we use it in a way of virtue? And it's just rechanneling the feelings that you all have. These are not new emotions. And we are trained in our world for some strange reason, or at least this world, right? This country in particular, in the city, where we use our energy and our force and our charge for things to defend ourselves or to protect ourselves or go against people or to, you know, prove our XYZ and our status and our knowledge and our, you know, value. And we don't use it in a place for virtue. And it is very strange if you think about it. And when we do it, there's also all this weird stuff that comes along with it. Like, I'm gonna love you, but I'm also gonna, like, you're mine. Like, there's like that stuff that's really weird that happens too. And so I think this is a really interesting one, is how do you start to notice where you have charge? And is that a place where it's creating abundance in your life? And does it create more generosity? And does it align with the values that you have that we've talked about, or the virtues that we've talked about? What does that look like? I think that, when we're in cities like New York, we're just always put up in a situation, not always, but often put up in a situation where we do need to kind of prove ourselves. And so we go out into the world with this charge of protecting. And what they're saying in the system is that's just going to hurt you big time. It's going to create more suffering, right? The basic concepts of karma that we talked about, right? Virtue and non-virtue. What was the definition of what is a virtuous karma? What's virtue? What does it do?
Pleasurable experience.
It creates pleasurable experiences, and non-virtue is unpleasant, suffering experiences. It's pretty. For them, in the system, they're saying it's pretty black and white. It's not to say there aren't nuances, obviously, but when you think of it that way, it's like, what do we do in our lives, and how do we realize that if you understand that the energy you put behind the actions that you do actually shift and change the DNA of that seed that you're going to be planting, how would you reconsider that? And how do you find different ways to look at that and be smart about, and at first it really is just going to be, like it's gross level, meaning kind of obvious level ways of thinking. I'm not going to go after that. I'm not going to go after that cockroach like that. Like, I'm not going to go, it really is that simple. Where, like, now when I look at bugs, after I've started practicing, like, I'm a big fan of just, I get a cup, and, I get the cup, and I slide a piece of paper, I hold the cup, and I hold it outside. And my family always makes fun of me. They're like, oh, that's so Mr. Miyagi of you, or whatever, which is really strange. But you reconsider every little moment, even those little subtle things, and even to really obvious things of how do I put if I don't feel if I feel a negative charge, at the very least, how do I even neutralize that so that I'm not going to bring that to it, and that changes the way you even engage in conversations. Like, now when I know I'm charged up, I'm not having that conversation, and I need to wait until I can just chill out and neutralize it and understand, how do I reposition this conversation or the place I'm coming that is coming from a place of generosity, and is that even possible? And until I can do that, this is not a conversation I can have, because I am not interested in screwing myself over anymore. Yeah? Okay. All right. The second one is Yongten Gishi. Again, Yongten Gishi. Yongten is good personal quality, and Gishi is basis. And it means it's the deed that's committed toward a very holy object. So it's specifically really referring to the 3 ratnas, or the 3 jewels that we know, which is what the organization is called. What are the 3 jewels? And what do they represent? Do we know? I mean, I know a lot of you know. What's the Buddha jewel? Yes.
Represents the emptiness of the Buddha's mind, meaning that because there's no nature to that mind that's just coming from itself, that any mind has the potential to become awakened.
Yeah, great. And the Dharma?
Similar, like, I think about it as the 3 things you said. It's the emptiness of each of those 3 things. So the Dharma would be the emptiness of the teachings. Or another way to think about that is not like the books or the texts, but the realizations in the heart of someone.
Exactly. Yeah. And then what about the Sangha?
It would be those people that have had those feelings.
Mm-hmm. So the idea here is that any deed that's committed towards any holy, they say very holy object, anyone, and this can be physical or verbal, right? That you do towards anybody that represents these aspects is going to guarantee good and bad, or I should say virtuous and non-virtuous, will in fact have that karma ripen. It's an absolute. Okay. So, there are times where you will meet, I laugh, there are times that you might meet teachers, for instance, where you're like, I don't know, I don't really like them. If you can, refrain from those types of thoughts. And I know that's hard because we kind of are habituated to being like, this is how you make your criticisms and your judgments. And if you can, try to refrain from, for sure, hating teachers in general. It may not suit you. It may not be your style. But to have any type of ill will or, applying any of the 10 non-virtues we talked about last week to teachers, organizations, anything that's really on the path or trying to support and teach other people around the 3 jewels, I would just simply refrain from. That's my advice. That's not the scripture is saying, you can do it, but this is what's going to happen if you do it. It also goes the same with virtuous activity, right? Doing good and supporting and helping, that's also seeds that will ripen in this lifetime, okay? One thing I will say, though, as we're talking about the emptiness of the 3, and we talked about the concept of emptiness, I think last week, right? It was last week we talked about emptiness, the pen? Yeah, okay. Unless you can, and I've talked about this in past courses, unless you can read somebody's mind, you have no idea who that person is. And you also don't know what their intention is. And so it would behoove you as a practitioner on a spiritual path to remind yourself that. And it's very easy to get into a place where you're like, I don't believe that she did this or he did this or what they said. You don't know what people are doing and why they're doing it. And as you actually start to evolve your practice and you realize that perhaps, not just perhaps, but all people are empty and you don't know what they are. And who knows? Honestly, I know this sounds really woo-woo for some people, but who knows what they are and what emanation they might be appearing to you. It is possible. I'll give you an example. I have this client whose name I won't say. And she is a very difficult client, and she's not in, she's a women-owned business, which is what I work with, companies that I work with, but her alignment, her value system is just totally off base. And it was a client that I brought on based on another ask of an investor friend of mine that I know to just keep an eye on this brand. And my team and I were it was insufferable moments. We're like, why do we take this? This is not what we do. She's not creating goodness in the world. It's just more mass consumerism. And it was last month, it created so much angst and anxiety and frustration. And actually, she was the best client we could possibly have, because what she taught us, which we were kind of wishy-washy about, was what kinds of work we don't want to do. It was the best gift we could possibly imagine. It started to crystallize the way in which we wanted to think about our work and how we wanted to address it and who we wanted to work with. And it was this place where we were kind of we were a little wishy-washy about how we wanted to present it. We were a little nervous about it and not sure about how we wanted to really put ourselves out in the world. And it was actually because of this client, we're like, okay, now we know what we don't want. Thank you so much. That was it was actually a blessing. And so every time I think about her and I see her her social media, I'm actually rejoicing. I'm like, oh my God, that was the best client we could ever have. I love you. You're great. I don't know if I'll work with you again, but and so it was interesting to start looking at how do you start to see different people in your life and what are they really out there to teach you? Because everyone really, ultimately, as you start to evolve your practice, are there to teach you something, believe it or not. And so this idea of emptiness is always really interesting, and how you play with it, where it's like, is my mom just really annoying and aggressive and in my face? Or is this an opportunity? Like, where are my opportunities here that I'm being taught every moment of the way? Okay. That being said, it does not mean that you need to stay in terrible, abusive relationships that are intolerable. I'm not saying that either. Like, don't use that as a place of, I'm going to resist, or not resist, but this is a practice of patience and I need to be in this for the rest of my life. It's not like that either. You have to use wisdom and judgment and discretion. But it is something where you start to look at people and understand that unless you know what they are thinking, absolutely, and their intention behind it, you really don't have a place to make a judgment of who they are. Okay? I'm really big on that. Sorry. I'm just gonna. Okay? Good. Number 3. Can we say Gyun Chaksu? Again, Gyun Chaksu. So what the system is saying is over and over again, meaning deeds committed over and over again. What they're saying is that if the deeds that you repeat constantly over and over and over and over again, whatever those are for you, and we all have something, that will actually create karmic seed that will result. It will ripen. Okay? So, like, people who consistently use, for instance, harsh words, right? Or there's people that are always kind of white lying or exaggerating, like you'll find people in your world that you'll see, including yourself, where there's just this constant habit or an action that you'll consistently do. They're saying in the system that will actually lead to seeds that will ripen. Okay? Good. And number 4, can we say Pama Supa? Again, Pama Supa. And what do we think Pa is? And Ma? And Supa is killing. So Master Vasubandhu is saying, if you killing your father or mother. Now, most of you, I hope none of you, are out there planning ways of killing your parents. That is not, I don't think any of you are doing that. What it does mean, though, is, and how it relates to today's time, is how do you, basically they're saying don't support your parents in facilitating their death. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. They're basically just saying that is a very, very, they are very high karmic objects. Facilitating their death means that there are karmic implications for you, and that those karmas will ripen, and it will create more suffering in your life.
So
yeah.
It's viewed as always bad.
Always bad. It's viewed as it will create suffering in your life. Yeah.
Right. So if your father has cancer and wants to die, is in horrible pain, and needs you to shoot the thing in him or whatever, even though that may be put him out of his suffering and give him exactly what he wants, there's no way to spin this that that's a good thing. It creates bad karmic seeds. It creates
Negative karmic seeds. Yes, that's what they're saying.
But the first one is committed with strong emotion. So if your strong emotion towards your suffering father is, I want him to stop suffering, he's not going to stop suffering in this life.
Yeah.
Right, and I want to be.
There's that gray area.
The
Right.
thing, the idea here and the baseline is that there's an implication and an assumption that we have this idea, not here necessarily, but traditionally we have an idea that when people die and you're putting them out of their suffering, that they're going to go to heaven or not live again. And what they're saying is that you don't, in the Buddhist system, is that you will be reincarnated. You will come back and have another life. And most humans aren't living their life in the virtuous way where they're actually going to have a higher rebirth. They're actually saying that most humans will actually have a lower rebirth. And the lower rebirth and the suffering that you experience there is not nearly as much as the suffering that you would experience when you're in the process of dying. So there's this idea of like, let's put them out of their suffering. But in fact, in their system, in this system, it's they're gonna be moved to a lower suffering anyway. That will actually be more painful than where they're at the moment.
I'm just curious, not to beat a dead horse, but where does like life support come in?
Yeah, I know. It's so interesting. I've heard it in different ways. I've heard teachers say things like, just don't do it. Like don't have life support as an option so that you're not in a situation where you have to make a decision to take them off life support.
Right. My father had a living will.
I know.
Which said,
it's really hard.
Life support,
yeah.
And it's the children who have to make that call.
I know. I have a grandfather who did the same thing, or he's still alive, but he's always going back and forth to the hospital, and it's a very difficult thing. And actually, I at one point, he and I had this very honest conversation because my parents refused to have it, and I said, you have to decide. You can't leave it to us to decide. Like, you need to decide how you want to pass, because I can't take that karmic. Like, that is not a karma that I want to have, nor can I have. So it wasn't, we had to have a conversation of, you can't leave it to your family or your kids or me, because he wanted me to be the power of attorney to decide. It's like, that is not something that I will do. That is your life, it's your decision, and you need to decide how this works for you. So that's how I did it. But it is it's an ongoing conversation. I mean, I think, what my advice would be, and if you're ever in a situation like this, seek counsel from your teachers and your Dharma community and see how it works for you. There are different ways I've seen in how, like when my dog passed, it was this ongoing thing. It's like the hospital, and especially in the Western system, it's a different mindset, right? I mean, the Western system in medicine is about how do we, there's this idea of how do we have the least amount of, it's about keeping, if you can't keep them alive, it's about this idea of trying to keep people alive, right? I mean, keeping beings alive, that's the place. And they're not going to do it, then let's let them go. And that's the mindset. And I remember even with my dog and the hospital she was in, the doctors and the nurses, she had really amazing care. And it was this ongoing conversation of, you're creating more suffering. And I, as a practitioner, it's like, I can't put her down. That's not something I can do. I will not do it. I will do hospice care. I will find ways to help alleviate any type of physical pain she may have in. And I want to make sure that her mind is the most calm, so that when she goes into the bardo, that she's not being afflicted and upset and scared and nervous. That's not where I want. So how do I create peace for her, but let her die when she is ready to die? And it must be done naturally. And so it was this ongoing thing. And it is a difficult thing for any of us that have been through that situation or will have that situation to come to deal with. And I have other practitioners have done it other ways, and we've talked about it. But all I can do is present to you what the teachings say.
Do they get into defining death?
Not that I know of, and not in this particular reading that we're doing in terms of how we define death. Yeah. Okay. All right. 2 things that will make karma ripen in this lifetime. Okay, first one is Shingi Kepar.
Shingi Kepar.
Again, Shingi Kepar.
Shingi Kepar.
So Shingi is object, and Kepar is distinctive. It's doing a deed toward a distinctive or powerful object. So they define a powerful object or a distinctive object as one that can benefit many beings, or a being that has come out of a high state of meditation. I'll just leave it at that for those two. The example that they give in the script in the reading, which this reading is the front part's a little dry, and then it gets kind of juicier towards the end when Tsongkhapa he does an excerpt of Tsongkhapa, which is actually fantastic. So I really encourage you to read. If you haven't read the other teachings, this is a good one to read. But the commentaries, right, with the First Dalai Lama, and he talks about in this teaching of the Buddha himself, who one of his former lives he was a monk, and he was a very knowledgeable monk. And in the monastery he was at, there was a schism happening, and there was another monk that who was also very knowledgeable. I think the two of them were kind of the top students. The other monk had brought the monks together, and the previous version of the Buddha, which he wasn't the Buddha at the time, but that was his previous life, he had made some kind of offhand comment saying, well, it's a woman who brought them back together. And back then, being a woman was like, yeah, it was a lower rebirth. It was also considered kind of inadequate, and which is another class, obviously. But anyway, and so what ended up happening is with that even one comment to someone who had done something so distinctive, someone who had actually done something that was quite powerful of bringing a Sangha back together. He had, I think they said 84 rebirths as a woman. I have a lot of opinions about that, but or I think maybe it was more than 500 lifetimes of a woman. Anyway, the point is that it does have an immediate impact of what that's going to look like. And they actually even said that his gender changed to a woman in that lifetime. And there's a lot of references of gender changing within the Buddhist scriptures that you'll see sometimes, but that they talk about that. Okay. The next one, 2, can we say Sampe Kempar?
Sampe Kempar.
Sampe is thought. And Kempar is distinctive. And it means a deed done with extraordinary motivation or thought, which is what the tantric path is based on, or the secret teachings are based on. The story that they give in the teaching is, in the reading, is there was a king who had a eunuch. His name was Longhua, and Longhua, he was castrated at a young age, and he saw 500 cattle going to get castrated, and out of just a deep sense of compassion and love, he saved the cattle from being castrated, and then in his lifetime was able to restore his organ. This is the story they have as an example, which I thought was funny, so I wanted to bring that up. It's true, which you'll talk about too. Okay, the next one. There are 4 distinctive objects that cause ripenings in this life that they talk about in the reading. The first one is someone who has just came out of cessation meditation for the first time. Anything you do toward them at that moment becomes very powerful.
How is this different than the previous list?
These are specific objects, like certain people that they're going to just go into. So you'll see the rundown. There's a similarity to them. Yeah. So it's somebody who according to the Abhidharma system, they're saying someone who who came out of meditative state and was very close to nirvana. They're saying it's almost as if, to them, they're saying it's almost as if they've come back from nirvana. And the first moments of them coming out of a meditative state is so incredibly crucial and incredibly powerful karmically. So in any way to cause harm to people that have come out of those meditative states, that's why, like, when you go to retreats, you just have to understand that people are in different states and you have no idea what that means and what that looks like. So it also means just, don't be on anybody's case. And I mean, can you imagine that you've gotten so close to nirvana and you come out of it and someone's like, why didn't you leave that dish towel rack? And you're like, what? Or on your ass about something. Like, what? Weird stuff happens in retreats all the time, in group retreats. Such weird tension. So that's the first one. The second one is someone who just came out of immeasurable love or no mind meditation for the first time. They are very close to liberation. So immeasurable love, or one pointedness, another way to think of it, is similar to how we think about the four immeasurables, which is the meditation that we did in class, or the first two that we've been doing in class. It means that when someone comes out of experiencing the four immeasurables, or even no mind, which means your mind is almost completely shut down. It's so subtle that it's shut down. That when you come out of those moments, or the meditation, you actually have a moment of no afflictions whatsoever. And so the last thing you want to be doing as a practitioner or anybody is to create any kind of affliction in that pure space.
Wait, have to pause.
Okay, I will try to answer.
This is what I don't understand. If what we're saying is like our world comes from us and everything is empty and it's just like we are projecting onto this, G has just come up. She just had a super deep meditation. You are like
super deep.
Close,
yeah.
This close to liberation. And I say something.
Yeah.
I didn't cause. Aaron did not cause.
Yeah. Sure.
It's G's karmic seed.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about?
That's true. Those are all valid. You're right. I mean, but the point, this is really from the perspective of your end of understanding how to be aware of your actions, because your actions, what I experience is my karma, and it's my, right? That's my experience, which is one thing, and you can't control that. And your karma is your thing. But what it means is that just understanding that there are these four different objects, is what they're calling it, or different states that people can be in, and knowing and being sensitive to that. I mean, hypersensitive to that, of how you address and interact with people for your own karmic sake, not for mine. Right? What your intentions are, not mine. Like, if you're at a retreat and someone has just been driving you crazy, and this happens a lot for anyone who's done group retreats, or even solitary retreats where, you might have someone who's actually attendant that's serving and, and creating food. That's why it's so important when you're in retreat spaces, you're not doing anything to create afflictions for other people. Because you have no, and it's not to say that whether they experience affliction or not, that's not your responsibility. You have no control over that, right? You could have been like, I made you a cup of tea. And they're just like, oh my God, why'd you create the tea that I hate the most, I'm allergic to? But that wasn't your intention. That's not your fault. That's not something that you can control. But it is something that you can control if you are have an intention to create some sort of affliction for that person. And so that's just something on your end that you have to be cognizant of. Okay. Yeah.
But again, this never turns out good.
In what way?
Well, you come out of meditation and I bring you flowers.
Yeah.
Because I love you, and you look at the flowers and say, oh, this is the best thing that could possibly happen to me when I come out of meditation.
Yeah.
So is that this has now been a very good thing and will ripen very good in this life, or is it always a bad thing like killing your dad?
No. It's not. This could be good or bad. So
Okay.
yeah. It's not like leave them alone. It means that just your actions of how you're going to be interacting is going to have a hyper impact with these types of beings in these states.
Right.
Yeah.
So who are the immeasurable?
The measurables. It means it's a type of meditation. It's like the 4 measurables that we did. So it's the feeling of having. It really is the feeling of having true bodhicitta, that you've come out of meditation, you have experienced a level of true bodhicitta is the way that I would explain it. Loving, like just having an experience of loving kindness and for all beings. Yeah. Okay. Third one. I know it's always interesting, like I said, because karma, the way it's talked about even in the teachings, it's always like this negative thing. Like, these are the things you should do, but it does also work in positive. Sorry, the third one. Okay. So the third one is someone who has just come out of seeing no self directly for the first time. So the way that we've talked about it in class, which is not how the Abhidharma system talks about it, but it's having the experience of emptiness. So someone who has had the experience of emptiness for the first, especially the first time, is somebody who's what we call a stream enterer, is somebody that that's considered a distinctive object. And then the last one is somebody who has just become an arhat. And an arhat is someone who has gotten rid of their mental afflictions permanently. So someone who has reached nirvana. Yes. Nirvana, yeah, that's right.
What exactly is the feeling?
What exactly is the feeling of reaching nirvana? I've actually never had anyone ask me that. I don't know. I've never reached nirvana. Okay. But it is
amazing. But
I know. Well, I mean, I'm sure it's quite amazing. You permanently have no afflictions. Imagine. I couldn't even imagine that.
Yeah. And is it a state that you just stay for a long time?
Forever. Yeah. That's the state that you have, that you've accomplished. Yeah.
So you're out of samsara?
Well, you still have your body at that point.
And then after that?
Yeah. And then you have to purify karmas to be able to then have your body manifest, which we will not go into because that's not sutra, but yes. Okay, 3 karmic results. So in the teachings, or in the reading, we start with Master Vasubandhu, but we end with Je Tsongkhapa. Geshe Michael was really excited about this part of it, so he added in, and I would absolutely read it because Tsongkhapa goes through these 10 correlations of what the 10 non-virtues look like in the world that we're in, and it is so fascinating to see that we have not evolved very much as human beings. Like, what? Okay, the first one is, can we say Namen? Again, Namen. Namen is ripening. Oh, sorry. Oh, I guess it's just ripening. Okay. So again here, he's saying that the ripening depends on how strong your emotions are behind the different actions that you do. It's the motivation. And that applies to virtue and non-virtuous deeds. He goes and talks about the difference of like big, medium, and lesser. So there's different degrees of it, right? So based on the more charge it has, in a negative sense, like if you're gonna go and kill someone with a lots of charge behind it and a motivation behind it, it will kick you into the hell realms, he'll say. And then he says if it's in the medium space, then it will kick you into the craving spirits, hungry ghost realm. And if it's in the lesser, it will kick you into the animal rebirth or animal realm. So there are these different kind of segments that he has based on what that charge is. Now, only you know what the charge is, right? And so that's why practices like meditation are so important. There is an aspect that they don't say, but it is, I think, implied. There has to be a love. No one knows your own mind but you. And the reason why meditation is so incredibly important is that it creates a level of self-awareness for you to understand and gauge what that is and the subtleties of that. Otherwise, you can come in and say, oh, I really cared. I mean, how many times have we done that where you're like, I really cared, or I really wasn't trying to be that mean, but you kind of know that there was a charge behind it and you're just not trying to let other people know that. You're like, no, it's just an accident. You're like, actually, it was a little bit more than that. It was a little, right? There's like stabs and jabs that we do. And you know that it was a little bit more than just a passive-aggressive comment, right? Or it was funny, but it was kind of meant to hurt, right? Only you know what those intentions are. So that's why, meditation, yes, of course, it does make you more relaxed. I mean, that's one of the side effects of it and can make you feel more blissed out. But it also allows you to have an awareness of your mind and the subtleties of it so that you can start to gauge just the discrepancies of how your mind really is and also be quite honestly like truthful to yourself to know where you are and what your intentions are. And what does having a charge with the big versus medium versus lesser really mean to you when you're going after a cockroach? Yeah? Okay. Number 2 is gyutun. Again, gyutun. So gyutun means corresponding. And it means that there's a similarity between what you did and what you get. The way that we have simplified it in this country is what goes around comes around, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. See, now when you hear that, you'll be like, you actually have no idea what you're talking about when someone says that. And they're like, oh, that's karma. You're like, well, kind of, not really. Okay, so they're saying basically there's a similar quality. And there are 2 kinds of gyutuns, naturally, since we are in a Galupa class. The first one, is this showing? No. Oh, okay. Is, can we say nyongwa? Nyongwa means similar experience. It means that there's a similar experience of what you get. So if you're going to steal things or take things that aren't yours, the result of it could look something like you never have enough or you always feel broke. Yeah, I know. Right? Or if there has been any kind of sexual misconduct, it would look something like it's always difficult to keep a partner. Like you're taking away other people's partners, it's going to be difficult for you to keep yours. So there's a similarity between those actions that you see. It's not like you, and the way we talk about it, which we will talk about more later in this course, like seeds, but the example that we've heard in the Sangha has always been the seed. Like if you plant a lemon seed, you get a lemon tree. Like you're not going to plant a lemon seed and get a pear tree. That's not going to happen. There's like produces like. And we will talk about laws of karmas more, but this is where we're starting. Okay. The second one is, can we say jepa? Jepa. So jepa is similar activity or habit. It means that there are similar activities or habits that will reoccur again. It actually speaks to like how we have predispositions to things, and there's a reason why you have a predisposition to it, because there's been a similar activity habit that's created that to happen. So for instance, if you have the tendency to be full of rage, that has been a karma that's actually probably from a previous life that was brought into your current life. Yeah? I know. So like, you have like there are some of us who have a predisposition to be angry, or jealousy is the thing, or there's so much, like the list of, or there's good stuff too. Like when I was doing this, when I was doing this lesson, I was thinking about Armando, and I'm like, Armando has such a nice, kind heart. And I'm like, he just has a predisposition of being nice. I don't have that, actually. He has it so much more than I do. Like, we're walking down the street yesterday, we're getting groceries, and we're walking, and I didn't even notice. And he turns back, and I'm like, what is he doing? And a restaurant on the corner, it was windy, I guess, and the sign, like their triangle sign, had fallen down. So he's back there, like, picking it up, and I was like, oh. And he goes, I'm gonna help their business so I can help mine. I was like, oh, but it was just this like natural tendency. And I thought, oh, that's so interesting. So it doesn't mean that these predispositions have to be always negative. I don't mean to bring up negative examples, but it does mean that some of the things that you have, just understand it didn't necessarily come from this lifetime. Like, you're not just being a jerk because you were just a jerk now. Like, you had jerkiness before that rolled in. And it doesn't mean that it can't change, right? Now that we understand the idea of emptiness too, and karma, it doesn't mean it can't change. But just know that you were inheriting karmas that come from other lifetimes of yours. And that's why generally you have a certain kind of predisposition to be a certain way, or certain things tend to trigger you, or, you're impatient and that's your thing, We all have something. Even Armando. Okay, number 3. Can we say doctorate?
Doctor.
Can we doctorate? Doctorate. Environmental. So what this means is that there is actually a karmic correlation to the world in which you live in. The scripture says environmental or dominant consequence is how they talk about it. And what they're saying is that the environment in which you live in is actually a karmic result. There's a karmic correlation. So if you live in a world where there's a lot of, and you'll read this in the reading, he says, if you live in a world where there are a lot of wars going on, or chaos and violence, it's because you, in your past life, have personally killed things in your lifetime. And all of these aspects, by the way, are personal. They're personal things for you. It doesn't mean that there isn't a collective karmic correlation that we have, or a collective karma that we share, but it means that your environment is a reflection or a result of the seeds that you've planted in your past lifetime. And so everything that you see from when taxes rise, when you feel that tax rising, that is because you've stolen or you've taken, and so you're getting that bad. You're feeling like something's being taken from you. So there are things in our environment when we see violence, when we see anger, when we see traffic jams, when we see terrible infrastructure, I can go on, social injustice, all those things are actually things that you've caused. And what this starts to do is you can actually start to work backwards now and look at what is the world in which I live in? What are my general personality traits that I have? And if I can understand that I caused those for myself to experience that, how can I then reconsider the new types of things I want to do so that I'm perpetuating a different type of trajectory in life in my future? You can't control what you're experiencing now, but you absolutely have agency to control what you want to experience in the future. And that's actually very empowering about karma. It's not just like, well, sometimes I hear people say a lot like, oh, that's my karma. And I'm like, what the hell does that mean? I mean, I get what they're saying, but it's also this moment where it's like, it just seems like such an out. Like, I didn't have a choice. And I find that comment to always be a little strange to me. Like, it's, well, I don't have a choice. It's just the way it is. That's, and also that means that when things happen that you are not happy with, things that bother you, things that create afflictions, when that karma happens and you experience it, it means that it's giving you a actually fabulous opportunity to replant a different kind of seed. so that the next time your boss or your partner or your mom or anyone is coming at you, at least it appears that they're coming at you, you get a choice in that moment. Am I going to go back at them to recreate this chaos that I'm experiencing now? Or am I going to decide that I'm going to pivot and change this cycle because I don't want this to keep happening over and over again? And you'll start to notice too, this isn't something that I'm saying you should believe in face value. I would say that you test it, like beta test it and see how it goes and see how it works for you. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe you're like, this is a bunch of just mumbo jumbo, gee. Okay, fine. Or does it actually change the way how your world starts to shift? And we do it, most of us, me included, forget that cycle all the time. I mean, there's kind of obvious things that we kind of have gotten better at for some of us who've been practicing. And then there are these subtle things that we notice, where we're like, well, I don't know, I don't save that cookie for myself. Or I think one example I remember that's like so clear in my mind that I remember you and I were talking about it last year, where I was talking about skincare. And I was like, I had gotten all this like skincare samples that I was so excited about. And then my mother-in-law was like, oh, I really wish I could, be better with my skincare. And I'm like, okay, so I was kind of like parsing. I'm like, well, I'll give her these 3, but I really want to keep these 2. And it was just this weird moment where I was just kind of hoarding. Like I didn't want to give it away and thinking like, that's crazy. That's crazy. If I want more skincare, I need to be giving this lady all my skincare, like have it. And so how do we do that all the time? Like even with work too, there are times where it's like, how do you play with those dynamics? How do we just say like, just take the job, have it, yeah, I mean, like take it. Like, how do we give things away from a place of understanding this? And what does that look like? And does that change your relationships that you have in your life, in your world? Instead of guarding, because we do that a lot. We guard and we protect and we don't want to give. And so where does that start to come into place? And that also is subtle ways. It's also like ways of not just giving, but also like listening too. I think as New Yorkers, we're so used to like, I know what's right. Like we're all like know-it-alls I just feel like we're always know-it-alls. So how do we have a place of saying, well, if I want to continue learning, right? How do I create space for other people to learn? If I want people to listen to me, how do I create space for people to listen? What does that look like? So it's not just action, but it's also energetic exchanges that we have that should be considered too. And if there are things that you are struggling with and it's difficult for you, find other people that are also having those challenges and help them. If you're having a hard time figuring out like, what am I doing with my life? Which I always hear a lot of people like, what am I doing with my life? Great. There are a lot of people that are also wondering, what are they doing with theirs, right? If there are people that are like, I'm struggling with this relationship I really want a different place to live. Like you help people that also resonate with you, because that's a really great practice of knowing how to create space and create the karmic causes to help them. There's something in that too that you will learn. I'm feeling really lonely right now. Great. Like you can go on Tinder, or you can find someone else who is also feeling lonely. And maybe they're not feeling lonely in the same way, but they are feeling lonely. So how do you reach out to them and connect? I feel disconnected. Find someone who also is disconnected and make connections. Get out of those comfort zones, and that's where you find path to grow. Okay. Good? All right. Oh, we did 10 virtues last time. This was just my own reminder. We are done. All right.
Sashi Fuki Jushin Meto Chan Virab Linshu Yende Yampadi Sangye Shindu Mikte Wardi Drokun Namda Shimla Juparsho
We're just going to close with a quick dedication. Take a moment and rejoice in being in class tonight. Taking the time and the effort to be here, to be open, present, and to listen. Commend your efforts. You didn't have to come, but you did. Rejoice in maybe one thing or maybe even a few things that you learned tonight that you think could actually help you. Maybe shift your mindset to a different worldview, or something that even simply expanded your knowledge. And dedicate those feelings to one person in the world who's having a hard time. Dedicate what you've learned, your effort, in wishing for them to be able to find a path for freedom, to end their suffering. Thank you.
Thank you, G.
Thanks, everyone. We're done on time.